Army Lieutenant Jason Mills was driving to his mother's funeral when a local cop pulled him over and shot him, despite his uniform and ID. Sergeant John Caldwell, known for his aggressive bias, dismissed Jason as just another fake, even after the truth stared him in the face. But then the military stepped in, and what happened next flipped the entire case upside down. Just wait until you see how this shocking story unfolds, and why justice, at last, had the final word. Sergeant John Caldwell had spent over a decade patrolling the dusty streets of Wilmington, Mississippi, a quiet town that had stopped changing long ago, but where tension always lingered beneath the surface. His uniform was never complete without a bulletproof vest strapped tight over his chest. To him, it wasn't just regulation. It was armor, a symbol of control, a barrier between him and what he called the rising chaos of the modern world. People in town had gotten used to his presence, but not everyone felt safer because of it. Whispers floated through the diner booths and barber shops, stories of overly aggressive stops, of raised voices escalating into unnecessary force. Some spoke of his short temper when dealing with those who didn't look like him. But no formal complaints ever seemed to stick. Or if they did, they quietly vanished inside dusty filing cabinets no one opened. On a warm Thursday afternoon, Lieutenant Jason Mills was finally heading home. The desert sand was still fresh in his memory, but he was stateside now, back from his third deployment in Iraq. His uniform was crisp, his posture straight, even behind the wheel. He was driving a rental car. His own vehicle was in the shop, and the license plates were out of state. Sunglasses shielded his eyes, and the patches on his shoulders told the story of a man who had given everything to his country. As he turned off the interstate onto a side road just a few miles from town, red and blue lights flared up in his rearview mirror. Jason frowned, signaled, and pulled over calmly. He had done nothing wrong. His blinkers worked, his speed was steady, but the approaching steps on the gravel shoulder were fast. Too fast. Caldwell stormed up to the driver's window, one hand already hovering near his holster. "Show me your hands! Now!" he barked. Jason didn't flinch. He kept both hands visible on the wheel. "I'm a United States Army officer," he said evenly, his voice trained by years of command. "Here's my military ID." He slowly reached toward the center console, careful and deliberate. But Caldwell had already unlatched the safety on his weapon. "You reach for anything, I swear." The shot came without pause. Jason's body jerked back against the seat. His sunglasses dropped to the floor mat. A deep red stain spread across his uniform. His hands were still up, still open. The quiet road erupted with the sound of screeching brakes as passers-by stopped and spilled from their vehicles. One woman pulled out her phone, shaking, whispering, "Oh my God," as she began to film. Another man shouted for someone to call an ambulance. But Caldwell didn't offer aid. Instead, he marched around to the passenger side, opened the door, and roughly snatched the military ID off the seat. He held it up, glanced at it, then tossed it onto the ground like trash. "Fake. Probably stole the uniform, too," he muttered, loud enough for bystanders to hear. But just then, a voice rang out from across the street. Firm, furious, familiar. "That's Lieutenant Mills! I served with him at Fort Benning." Gasps rose from the growing crowd. Cameras turned. And in that moment, the badge on Jason's chest spoke louder than anything Caldwell could say. The video spread across social media faster than any official statement ever could. Within hours, #Justice for Lieutenant Mills climbed to the top of trending charts nationwide. People who had never heard of Wilmington, Mississippi, now knew it as the town where a decorated Black Army officer was shot during a traffic stop, even after calmly identifying himself. The footage, shaky but clear, showed not just the moment of the gunshot, but the stillness of his hands, the calm in his voice, the badge discarded like nothing. Viewers were first outraged. But then, when the backstory began to surface, that outrage turned into something deeper: sorrow. Jason Mills wasn't just a man in uniform. He was a veteran with 14 commendations, 2 Bronze Stars, and a spotless record. He was a father of 2, a boy named Caleb who played t-ball, and a daughter named Zoe who had just started piano lessons. His wife Amanda taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school. That day, Jason had been driving not on duty, not on mission, but to attend his mother's funeral in Baton Rouge. He had rented the car because his was too small to carry the floral arrangements she loved. In the hospital, Jason survived, but the bullet had shattered his shoulder and grazed his lung. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive, but lucky didn't change the fact that his right arm would never regain full mobility. The Army's medical board would later confirm. His combat career was over. He could no longer serve the way he had for over a decade. The very uniform he had worn with honor was now the reason someone had pulled the trigger. While the country held its breath waiting for justice, the response from city officials was chillingly flat. "The officer acted within protocol," read the official statement from Wilmington's mayor's office. "An internal investigation is ongoing." That was it. No mention of Mills, no expression of concern, no acknowledgement that the man in the hospital had given years of his life to the same nation whose laws Caldwell was supposed to enforce. And then came Amanda. Standing on the courthouse steps, she faced the cameras with tears drying on her face and her back, straight. "He's not just a soldier," she said, her voice steady but full of pain. "He's a man, a father, a husband, and anyone who shoots a man without stopping to see who he is afraid to see people at all. Only labels." The footage of her statement went viral, too. Her words echoed across screens, shared with captions like, "Say her name too. Amanda Mills is speaking for all of us." For a moment, it seemed like the system might move, that someone would act. But when the case reached the state level, the district attorney, a white man who'd held his seat quietly for 7 years, released a brief announcement. "Due to insufficient evidence, no charges will be filed at this time. The victim may have contributed to the escalation by his behavior." That sentence hit the public like a second shot, blaming the victim, again, despite the video, despite the witnesses, despite the facts. Outrage turned into protest. City streets filled with signs, candles, chants. The name Jason Mills was painted across murals, printed on shirts, shouted from podiums. Petitions calling for Sergeant Caldwell's suspension reached 1 million signatures. But still, silence from the officials. And so the people answered for them. 2 weeks after the incident, the nation was still holding its breath. The streets had not quieted. The hashtag still trended. The petitions had crossed the 1 million mark. But nothing from the local government had changed. No charges, no suspension, no apology. That silence was broken in the most unexpected place. Not a courtroom, not a governor's office, but on the stone steps of the U.S. Capitol. Major General Kevin Blake, Deputy Chief of Joint Military Command, stood before a sea of microphones and reporters, his military uniform gleaming under the sun. Cameras from every major news outlet zoomed in. The country waited. "I am speaking today, not just as an officer," Blake began, voice steady, eyes unwavering, "but as a man who has worn this uniform for 30 years. Lieutenant Jason Mills is a soldier, a leader, and above all, an American citizen who followed the law and suffered for it. If a state prosecutor cannot defend a citizen in uniform, then the military will. As of this moment, we are forwarding all evidence related to the incident to the Pentagon's Office of Military Justice. This matter will now fall under the jurisdiction of the Uniform Code of Military Justice." The statement stunned the nation. It was unprecedented. For a senior military official to publicly challenge the failure of a state's civilian legal system was not only bold, it was historic. In that moment, the military wasn't just defending one of its own, it was making a statement to the nation. Silence is not neutrality. Within 24 hours, a new video surfaced online. Shaky footage from inside a gym locker room. It showed Sergeant Caldwell in casual clothes, laughing with two other men. His words, loud and unmistakable, cut through the noise of weights clanking and lockers slamming. These guys in uniform think they can do whatever they want. Not in my town. I don't care what patches they wear. They all bleed the same. The clip went viral within minutes. No edits, no context needed. The arrogance, the disrespect, the lack of remorse, it fueled a fire that was already raging. People didn't just demand answers now. They demanded action. The petition for Caldwell's removal surged past 1.4 million signatures by nightfall. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and public figures added their voices. Some held press conferences. Others simply shared the clip with one caption: "Enough." Then, without warning, a statement was released from the Department of Defense. It came not from a spokesperson, but directly from the Secretary of Defense. In response to the unlawful use of force, resulting in severe injury to an active reservist officer, and in accordance with Article 118 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Sergeant John Caldwell is hereby relieved of duty, detained by Federal Chief MS, military police, and ordered to stand trial before a military tribunal. The public reaction was immediate and thunderous. For the first time, a clear consequence was on the table. The message was simple. If no one else would act, the military would. When the arrest came, it wasn't local officers knocking on Caldwell's door. It was military marshals in full regulation dress, arriving in unmarked federal vehicles. They didn't speak to the press. They didn't gesture for cameras. They simply did their job. Caldwell was taken into custody without incident. But for those watching, it wasn't about the arrest. It was about accountability, something long promised, rarely delivered, and now, finally, underway. The courtroom at Fort Meade was filled to capacity. Cameras streamed the proceedings live to millions around the world. But inside the tribunal chamber, there was a silence that felt sacred. Decorated officers sat shoulder to shoulder with civilians. Members of Congress were present. So were veterans, students, and journalists. They hadn't come for spectacle. They came for truth. When Lieutenant Jason Mills entered the room, every person rose to their feet. His right arm was in a medical sling, the Purple Heart pinned over his chest. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He simply nodded, a quiet gesture of acknowledgement to those who stood with him. His presence didn't demand respect. It earned it. On the other side of the courtroom sat Sergeant John Caldwell, no longer in uniform, but in a standard military detainee jumpsuit. He kept his eyes forward, his jaw locked. He never looked at Mills, not once. The tribunal began with formal charges: assault on an active duty officer, abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming of a service member, and willful disregard for human life. The prosecution laid out the evidence: eyewitness accounts, body cam footage, the gym locker room recording. The defense made no attempt to deny the facts, only to question the intent. But when the presiding judge directly asked Caldwell whether his actions had been racially motivated, the room waited for an answer. He said nothing. And then came the final blow, the video that had shocked the country. It was played again for the courtroom, unedited. Caldwell's voice, clear and confident: "I'd shoot those heroes again. Uniform or not, doesn't make a difference." A wave of stillness spread through the chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was louder than any outrage. By the end of the day, the verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. The sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Though symbolic and not binding by law, the Pentagon issued an unprecedented recommendation, not a policy change, but a statement. That Sergeant John Caldwell had, by his own words and actions, desecrated the very values he was sworn to protect. Their recommendation, read aloud in court, stunned the room. Had this been wartime, and had his victim not survived, his conduct would meet the criteria for capital consequences under military justice. As such, we symbolically affirm he would have faced the firing squad, not as punishment, as a reckoning. It was a rare moment where words carried the weight of generations. 1 month later, in a ceremony held on the south lawn of the White House, Jason Mills stood once more, this time not as a survivor, but as a symbol of resilience. He received the Medal for Valor from the President of the United States, a recognition rarely awarded outside of combat. In his speech, Jason spoke with calm conviction. "I didn't come here to be called brave. I didn't survive so I could be called strong. I came because too many didn't make it home. I came to be their voice. I came to remind this country that courage doesn't wear a color. It wears integrity. I will not back down. Not for my children. Not for the truth, and not for anyone who still believes that justice belongs to all of us, not just to some." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Veterans saluted. Children held signs with his name. Reporters lowered their cameras just to witness the moment. And in that moment, it was clear. The story of Jason Mills was no longer just about one man or one act. It had become a movement, a reminder that dignity cannot be silenced, and truth, once spoken, can light a path forward for generations to come.